Good morning, everybody. It's Friday. Welcome to Safe Defend Live. I am Dave Evans with the great Doc Becky. We're going to talk about what it means to be proactive and what you may not be doing to keep your kids safe. Is that fair, Doc?
Yeah, it's very fair, but it applies to everywhere, not just kids.
Hope it's not a course fact. We talked about this earlier. You got to go take action.
Yeah. Now, I was just thinking, because it's always frustrating to me when I go to conferences and I see the vendors there, and about 99.9% is all geared towards like security, like keeping bad guys out. And very little to do with prevention. And it's kind of funny because when you talk to these people, they'll say, "Oh yeah, we're preventive. We're doing prevention." And so their idea of prevention is, "Oh, our camera and our AI picked up the guy with the gun coming in, walking down the hallway, right?" And they view that as prevention, right? And so I kind of thought about that, and there's proactive prevention and reactive prevention. And what they're really talking about, if you break it down, is it's really reactive prevention. You're not really preventing it from the standpoint of actually, stopping the violence before it happens. The violence is already imminent. They're already got the gun. They're already in the hallway, or they're approaching, and then hence leads to all the stuff that's out there for the vendors and all the stuff that they're trying to sell to school districts and workplaces and stuff like this. And what they miss is really just an understanding what prevention is, And so you can, I guess, technically say that, if my camera and my AI or whatever picks up a guy with a gun or a bulge that looks like a gun, and you let people know. I mean, technically, and you stop them. I mean, technically, you're preventing the violence, but it's really reactive prevention. I want to take a step back and look at proactive prevention, which is actually stopping it way before the attack is underway or just about being executed and things like this. And so, for me, it's kind of like definitions are everything. Definitions drive operations in any organization. Okay, and operations will reveal your mindset of where you're coming from. And a really kind of I don't know, this is kind of a strange example, but it works, right? If you look at terrorism or counterterrorism, right, and you look at the FBI's role, the military's role, and other agencies' roles, by their operations, I can look at those operations and I can tell you exactly what their mindset is and how they define terrorism. Because the FBI defines terrorism, if you look at the definition, it's going to be breaking a law. So therefore, they're going to take an investigative, law enforcement, lock them up approach. The military defines terrorism and the terrorists basically as enemies. So they're going to kill and break things, and that's how they deal with it. And they're very different, and it's all part of our counterterrorism strategy, but it's very, very different. And so if you look at, let's say, like, schools and workplaces and things like this, and you look at what is it that they're doing in relationship to targeted violence, okay? Well, if you look at that they're buying stuff for the perimeter, they're buying stuff like metal detectors, things like this, they are defining the problem as something that is outside of the school or outside of the workplace, okay? When, in fact, in schools, about 92%, 91%, depending on it, is going to be a current or former student. And so what do you do when you're spending 90% of your budget on strangers when that's only about maybe 8-9% of the problem? And so I think that we have to kind of step back and think about what we mean by prevention and what we mean by definitions. The other thing is just what do you call them, right? We've had this discussion in the past. It's been a while, so I wanted to bring this up again. Is, what do you call them? You call them an active threat? Do you call them a bad guy? Do you call them an active killer? Do you call them an active shooter? Well, you have to decide, and that's everyone's decision on how they want to formulate that. But just so you know, and just what I've noticed is that when I've looked at schools and workplaces that are being preventive, right, they are doing their response, which is it's really a response, but they're calling it prevention. They're doing their reactive prevention from the standpoint that not only is it going to be an outsider, but they're going to use a gun, and so they prepare for the gun, and they have metal detectors, and and they do that because again they are using a definition active shooter, which again reveals their mindset, which again reveals their operations, and then how they actually manage this whole potential incident if it happens. Right. The bottom line is if you prepare for the gun, you're going to miss the knife, and if you prepare and if you don't prepare for something else like running someone over in the parking lot, or poisoning, or it could be anything, because again it's a misunderstanding of the offender and the motivation. It's not about the
Doc,
weapon.
I think you hit something that's really important. We've defined the wrong threat. I mean,
What's that?
we've defined the wrong threat, right?
Yep.
The 8% of our threat is outside the wire, outside the fence, outside the school. 91 to 92% of our threat is inside the school. So let's take 3 steps back. If we're preparing for a threat that's only 8% of our problem, well, we're going to miss 92% of the opportunities to stop it. Fair?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so when you talk about being proactive, it also is going to the root cause. This is why we keep having these happen, Doc, because we keep saying we're going to focus on the gun. We're going to focus on the person outside the wire that's going to come into our campus and shoot it up. Okay, well, how big a threat is that? This is the old operator. He asks these questions in planning meetings, and like, okay, but what? I mean, is that really the problem we're trying to solve? I think when we talk about this, whatever you call it, we need to start with what problem we're trying to solve. Who is causing the problem, and how do we stop it? And that is the number one key to being proactive, is having the right definitions and the right person, thing, or whatever that you're trying to eliminate or reduce the chances of. And I appreciate we call them active shooters. What do you want to call them? I don't care. What they really are is children on the path to violence. They've been wrong. I mean, let's speak really honestly about this. They're not an active shooter until they are. They're not an active killer until they are. They're a person on the path to violence because somebody has caused a grievance with them, and it has gone unnoticed or unrecognized by adults and hasn't been addressed. Is that fair?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. It just kind of goes back to definitions. The bottom line is if you define the problem as an outsider, you're going to miss 92% of the problem. Yeah. And you're wasting your money, right? If you're focusing just on that. And if you're focusing on active shooter as your definition, you're focusing on the gun. And if you're focusing on the gun, you're going to miss the knife. And here's another fact is that only 60% of the school shootings involve firearms. The other's 40% of it, which is nearly half. 40% is done with edged weapons. Why? Because they couldn't get the gun for whatever reason. They have access to the gun. And so those two definitions right there, if that could be fixed, as far as how we look at these situations, yeah. That's going to increase our ability to not only be proactive in terms of prevention, which is what you're describing, right? Knowing it's a kid in crisis, knowing it's going to be very unlikely that it's going to be some stranger, right? And it's also going to help those, because this is important too, is the proactive response. Okay, the proactive response. If you're looking for a gun, you're going to miss the knife. Again, the definition problem. And so if you can really sit back and understand that definitions drive operations, and if your operations are geared toward wrong definitions, then you're going to miss the proactive prevention piece of the kid that's in crisis, and you're also going to miss the proactive response piece, which is planning for the gun and missing the knife.
Well, and I think we're setting up systems, and I'm going to use the surveillance word and use a military term and reconnaissance word. We're using materials that the surveillance and reconnaissance is not identifying the problem soon enough with current systems to prevent it from happening. It is the surveillance and reconnaissance systems in schools today are a response mechanism.
Yep.
Right? If this happens, we do this. If not, Joe got bullied in the hall today, we didn't have a teacher talk to him. Or Sally's missed 5 days of school in a row. Is she been sick, or is there something going on? Did something happen? And we talked to her and walked her through what she's dealing with. From a operational level look at what our schools are doing, they're getting bad advice from people because they're only focused on the reaction and they're not focusing on the prevention. Part of it is a society thing. Right? We're scared to tell people we have a problem.
Yeah.
And we don't want people that our kids have a problem, so we're not getting the help they need because, well, our children will never have it, frankly.
Well, part of the problem you're discussing or you're mentioning there is it's also it's oftentimes just a checkbox, and they're going to take the easy thing out because they want to move on to the next thing. And again, if you don't really understand the problem, understanding the problem on how to proactively prevent it, and understanding the problem for if you can't prevent it, how to proactively respond to it, then you're going to not be effective. And this is like a huge misstep, because if you misdiagnose, but if you misdefine what proactive prevention is, you're going to miss 92% of the problem. If you define proactive response in schools, you're going to miss 40% of the attacks because they don't use guns.
So let's talk about proactive steps. If you have a threat assessment, a living threat assessment program in your school, that is a proactive prevention tool, right? If you have training in your schools, your teachers and your students to see things and say things, you have a proactive piece to your prevention.
Right.
Right. If you teach people how to defend the threshold and how to secure their room and whether they should fight or flee, you have proactive response.
Yes.
This goes off, we're going to lock the door, we're going to take these messages to be safe, and we're going to secure the threshold. That's proactive. If you have video surveillance in your school, you have reactive solutions. They're okay. They're not bad. They don't hurt, but they're not proactive because you're not going to do anything until you see an action taken. Right? You can't respond until an action is taken. A violent action. With proactive preparation and threat assessment, you can take action before anybody gets hurt. Right? With proactive threshold protection, you can secure your room before the threat gets there and start shooting people up. Right? If you have notifications that reduce the time for your security forces or your police to get there, you have a proactive response because now they're alerted sooner, they get there faster, so you can reduce that time in the threat zone for people that aren't trained to deal with it. We have to understand what's being pitched to us by companies and how they react. And they're not bad companies, they're all trying to help secure our kids. They're good people. I'm not dishing on the company. I'm just simply saying those things are nice to have, and they're going to prevent the kids that think about doing something, but know that the system's in place, they're not going to do it. But the kids that are in distress, have a grievance or impact of violence, nothing you can do as far as surveillance and response will probably prevent them from stepping into the school and doing what they want to do. Am I wrong?
No.
Like I say, locking your doors keeps you good people from making a bad decision.
Yeah. And I think one of the kind of just last thing I kind of want to, leave with everybody here is there's a difference between responding and reacting. We don't want to react. We want to respond. And responding means that it's thoughtful, it's planned, and you're being proactive.
That's a fair statement. Well, man, Doc, it's good to see you. You need to smile more. It's been great to see you. I know you took last week and stuff going on. It's good to have you back here with us. Looking forward to next week. I hope things are going great for you and your family. We just keep educating people.
Sounds good, Dave.
Someday they'll figure it out. All right, with that, Doc and Dave, we'll see you next week. We are out of here.